Welcome to Ben Breaks Down Bills. My name is Ben, and the bill we are breaking down today is HB 1557, Parental Rights in Education. It comes out of Florida, and since its inception has been referred to as the Don't Say Gay bill. I wouldn't be surprised to find out that this bill is in fact some sort of attack, simply because the last thing to come out of Florida was meth gators. Yes, I wish that was a joke, and yes, someone should apologize to the state of Tennessee for it. As always, before doing a full analysis of any piece of literature, you have to understand your critical lenses by asking some questions. What is your name? What is your quest? And what is the airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow? Alright, the real questions are 1. Who wrote it? 2. What's the topic? And 3. What else was happening in the world with regards to the topic at the time of writing? 4. Law specifically, what problem does it intend on fixing? These are all important to understand the potential biases of the writer before reading the piece. With this bill, the answers are: who wrote it? The Republicans. What are the topics? Education, sexual orientations, and gender identities. What else was happening? Nationwide divisive debate about trans rights. What's the problem? They say it intends on fixing the issue of teachers instructing students on sexual activity before an age-appropriate time. People have been calling this the anti-grooming bill, which to me is just a missed opportunity to call it something more exciting like the anti-Woody Allen bill. Now, the question is, what relationship does the writer have with the topic? Republicans historically have taken antagonistic stances against both the topics of education and the LGBTQ+ community. We should be wary of any law they write regarding these topics. I know some people out there have just as much ability to comprehend languages as Christopher Columbus had the ability to find India, so I want to say this as plainly as possible. We are not skeptical of the bill because Republicans. We are skeptical because the author of the bill has a negative relationship with the topic. It's like if Captain Ahab was writing a bill about whales, or if Ursula wrote a bill about white men and mermaids. You should be wary of anything these people have to say about these things. The first section of a bill is always a quick overview of the changes the bill makes. This 7-page bill has 26 different changes, which is about 3 more changes than there are chips in an unopened family-sized bag of Lay's. I would read them all to you, but I don't want to. And if I had them scroll on screen right next to me right now, it would just look like a commercial for the latest "That's What I Call Music" CD. You'll have to take my word for it when I tell you, just like the points on Whose Lines Is Anyway, the words in this section really don't matter. Now we get into the actual meat and potatoes of the bill, or the potatoes and potatoes if you're vegan. There are 3 sections of this bill, with section 3 just being the date the bill will be active. July 1st of 2022. Section 1 tells us this bill will add a new paragraph to subsection 8 of section 1001.42 of the Florida statutes. Whenever you are reading a bill and that bill is updating part of an already existing statute, it is always important to read the rest of the section of that statute to better understand the context of the bill. I took the liberty of reading subsection 8 of section 1001.42 of the Florida statutes, and it's completely unimportant. I mean, I could tell you that section 1001.42 of the Florida statutes deals with schools, and subsection 8 is about student welfare, and this bill technically falls under that category, but paragraphs A and B of subsection 8 have no effect in the new paragraph C, and that's why it's completely unimportant. But that's a lot of words. You just trust me, right? Dad, quick note on bill format if you choose to read any yourself. Anything that's underlined is new stuff being added, and anything that's stricken through is old stuff being removed. This bill has no strikes, which means it's much less work for me, and it's bad at bowling and baseball. I guess it technically could be good at baseball if you imagine the bill is at bat right now, but then who would be on first? There are 7 sections in paragraph C, and I will get to all of them right after I figure out a good way to make a joke about the 7 C's. Did you know that there's no official 7 C's? The 7 C's people consider to be the 7 C's differ depending on where you're from or how you choose to interpret it. You know, now that I think about it, the 7 C's have a lot in common with this bill. They're both super vague and wildly up to interpretation. The simplest way to break down this bill, I think, would be to go section by section from 1 to 7. I'm gonna start with section 3. Section 3 has been the most discussed part of this bill, and also the part I see the most people completely misunderstanding. Section 3 in its entirety reads, "Classroom instruction by school personnel or third parties on sexual orientation or gender identity may not occur in kindergarten through grade 3 or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students in accordance with state standards." Ben, that seems really straightforward. How are people misunderstanding it? Thank you so much for asking. As a white man, it's my duty to confidently tell people when they're wrong, even though I have no real qualifications in this field. But don't worry, I have friends that do have real qualifications, they just can't write jokes, which is why you're watching me right now instead of following your local reps on Twitter. Let's break down section 3 into 2 parts so we can all understand it a little bit easier. The first part is telling us that nobody can teach sexual orientation or gender identity in school. I have seen many supporters of this bill confusing this to mean the same thing as saying any sex ed. They seem to think sexual orientation and gender identity is the same as sex. Here's a little breakdown for you just in case. Sexual orientation is whom you're attracted to. Gender identity is whom you feel you are. If you don't get that, then yeah, I could see how you would think it's the same thing as sex, because you don't get that either. And hey, before you hit enter on your "you still shouldn't be teaching sexual orientation and gender identity to kids" comment, let me tell you about how people have been misunderstanding the second half of this section. Once again, I have seen many supporters of this bill claim that this bill only pertains to kindergarten through 3rd grade. And I don't blame them for thinking that. This bill was written to make you think that. It very plainly says K through 3 right there on the box, but then it says or. What the second half of section 3 really says is that there is no instruction at all from kindergarten to 3rd grade, and any instruction after that must be deemed age appropriate and developmentally appropriate according to state standards. As a logical person, your next question should be, what are the state standards regarding those things? I'll let you know right now. The state standards in Florida for age and developmentally appropriate education on sexual orientation and gender identity are about as prevalent and existent as the dress code at Walmart. This bill is opening up schools and teachers to be sued by any wackadoodle that decides they didn't like something that their kid of any age or grade heard in school. And no, I don't think you're a wackadoodle for taking an interest in your child's education. However, if you want to sue a school because your 17-year-old child's teacher taught them how to use the singular they, I absolutely think you're a wackadoodle. Maybe you're one of those people that thinks kids shouldn't be worrying about this stuff anyway. And that's great that you think that, really. Now, as soon as you figure out how to actually control what kids worry about, let me know, because that's when your opinion will start to matter to anyone other than yourself. Maybe you genuinely think that there isn't a normal or kid-friendly way to teach sexual orientation or gender identity to kids. Let me introduce you to the story of Goldilocks and the 3 bears. In this story, we have a mama bear, a papa bear, and a baby bear. Or as I like to aggressively remind you, 2 gender identities, a sexual orientation, and a baby bear. You could just as easily read a story about 2 princes. Maybe one that has diamonds in his pockets and another that wants to buy him rockets. Did I spend way too much time trying to make a Spin Doctors reference just now? Yes. Do I know that maybe 3 of you are gonna get the reference? Absolutely. Am I keeping it in anyway? You bet your sweet prince I am. And look, I know this is going on the internet and you're all a bunch of monsters, so let me be abundantly clear. You don't have to stop the story to point out all the orientations and identities. Simply reading a story about 2 princes is enough for gay kids to understand that they are normal, loved, accepted, and represented. At this point, there are 2 types of people that would oppose classroom instruction on these topics in the manner I have suggested. People who think teaching kids about gay and trans people in any capacity somehow grooms or influences them to become gay or trans themselves, and people who think kids don't know they're gay. If you are the first type of person, please allow me to point out that every single Disney movie up to this point is centered around a man and a woman falling in love. Every movie, every show, every piece of media has always featured heterosexual relationships, and yet gay people still exist. Do you remember that commercial with the 2 old ladies, and one of them was posting sticky notes on the wall of her house, and then the other old lady was like, "What are you doing?" And the first old lady was like, "I'm posting to my wall." And the commercial ended with the other lady going, that's not how that works. That's not how any of that works. That's what I think of whenever I see somebody claim that telling kids about gay and trans people will turn them gay or trans. And if you're the other type of person that thinks 6, 7, or 8-year-old kids don't know that they're gay yet, you either don't understand what being gay is, or you don't remember being a kid. When I was in 2nd or 3rd grade, I had a crush on a girl named Kelly so bad that my friend Chase, to this day, will not let me live it down. I was 7, and I thought a girl was cute, and that was all I needed to know. I couldn't imagine what it would have been like if I was 7 and I thought a boy was cute in a time and a place where the teacher wasn't even legally allowed to teach me that I wasn't alone. You don't care about kids, you only care about what your idea of a kid should be. Don't worry though. You're not the first to be like this, and you won't be the last. Just don't be surprised when your kid comes home from school one day and starts saying things like, "Oh my, what big teeth you have." And no, big and bad are not compliments in this story. One last note about Section 3. This is the only section that includes a kindergarten through grade 3 stipulation in any capacity, so everything else in this bill applies to all grades without exception. First grade, ninth grade, Mercury in retrograde, all of them. Only 6 more sections to cover. Don't you just feel so pretty and witty and, that was weird. Anyway, the rest of these should go by pretty quickly. A lot of this bill is just a legal bag of popcorn. Quick, lacking substance, full of hot air, and I will need to wash my hands when I'm done. I'm not going to read every line of the remaining sections, so if you want to go back and read through it yourself, be my guest. Right now, I'm just going to cover a brief summary of each one. Sections 1 and 2 work in tandem to notify parents of changes in their child. I'll come back to this because it needs more explanation. Section 3, we just covered. Section 4 makes it so all student support services offered by the school follow the guidelines set in place by the state. Section 5 says at the beginning of each year, schools have to inform parents of any health services they provide students and offer parents the option to decline any of those services. Section 6 deals with well-being questionnaires and health screenings, and I might have more to say about that if I knew what that was. Section 7 allows parents to sue the school district if they feel any part of this bill was violated. The only part in Section 7 I really feel the need to point out is that the school district being sued is responsible for paying all court costs, fees, and special magistrates, even if the school wins the case and it's determined they didn't violate anything. Because, as we all know, at the end of the day, it's not actually about being right. It's about bankrupting the already underfunded school system as part of a war on education that started in the 70s. It's Propaganda 101. We've all read Animal Farm. Unless, of course, you went to a school in one of the counties that banned that book for completely unrelated reasons. If you haven't read it, there's a pig named Snowball and a pig named Napoleon, and you can probably guess which one the bad one is. Either way, the spider dies in the end. We're in the final stretch. For any of my military followers, think of this as the single leg over. For any of my non-military followers, you don't get an analogy. You're fine. Sections 1 and 2 use a lot of words to say very little. They are the we have to hit the word count paragraphs of this essay. The simplest way I can describe it, Section 1 says schools must notify parents if there's a change in a student's mental, emotional, or physical health or well-being, while Section 2 says that schools can't make rules to not do Section 1. It sounds silly, it's because it is. It's the legal system's version of the first 2 rules of Fight Club. Don't talk about Fight Club and do not talk about Fight Club. They're different, I swear. Sections 1 and 2 are potentially the scariest and most harmful sections in this bill, although you would never be able to tell just by reading the bill. They're like a couple of geese. You see them from a distance and think, there's no way those oversized ducks would attack me. But 7 stitches and a ruined field trip later, and you know better. The reason they're bad is because of what all the state considers to be a part of a student's mental, emotional, or physical health or well-being. In order to find out what the Florida government includes in these categories, we actually have to leave the bill and jump into the House analysis. Every bill has an analysis by the people that wrote the bill. The analysis, among other things, spells out what the bill intends to do and why it was written. It's kind of like every time J.K. Rowling sends a tweet claiming that another one of her characters was gay the whole time. You're like, that's not what I thought when I read it, but I guess they're gay now. You can find out what we're looking for in the House analysis in Section P, Chapter Sherman, subsection 42, paragraph Wallaby Way, subparagraph Sydney. It's Nemo. We found him. It's in the House analysis section 1, substantive information, Chapter A, effective changes, subsection present situation, paragraph Florida school districts maintain policies that exclude parents, or, if you speak English, the last paragraph on page 4 before the citations in the footnote. I do think it's kind of important to understand that first part. We're looking in substantive information because this section includes all the important information as to why the bill was made. The present situation subsection is a where is he now subsection dedicated to the situation from Jersey Shore. Is he wearing a shirt? Probably not. The real present situation subsection in the effective changes chapter brings us more specifically to what is currently happening that led to this bill. This subsection begins by stating that the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution and the Supreme Court have upheld legal precedent to do what Florida wants to do in the bill. The 14th Amendment, if you didn't know already, is the Constitution's version of the Declaration of Independence's unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Fun fact, the 14th Amendment wasn't written until 1866, so for like 90 90 years or so after the founding of our country, we were mostly just pretending that those rights were legally binding. Why we were pretending? Well, that's simple. Because if it were legally binding from the beginning, then we would have had to write a bunch of stipulations and exceptions to the rule that would have still allowed us to have slaves. And do you really think the men that were too lazy to work their own fields and clean their own houses wanted to write more than they had to? Think with your dipstick, Jimmy. And yes, the Supreme Court has held that the fundamental right for a parent to oversee the care, custody, and control of a child is granted by the 14th Amendment. So everything checks out there. This next part isn't really important for us to further understand the bill, but I think it's funny, so I'm gonna tell you. The House analysis cited the Santosky versus Kramer Supreme Court case from 1982 to confirm that the 14th Amendment protects, quote, the fundamental liberty interest of natural parents in the care, custody, and management of their child. Why is this funny? Because the case that's being cited is a case where the state of New York terminated that liberty from a couple of parents due to permanent negligence. And no, permanent negligence isn't funny. But the fact they chose this case to prove that parents have rights over their children is. How could the Supreme Court take those rights if the parents never had them in the first place, huh? It's like Hank Green says in a song about an anglerfish. Yeah, the deep sea anglerfish has no reason to be happy, but it has no friggin' idea what else to be. It checks out, but boy is that a roundabout way to get there. It's also worth noting that they've cited a court case in which parents lost their fundamental rights to care for the child due to permanent negligence in analysis for a bill that would force teachers to out gay and trans kids to their parents. Is it irony or foreshadowing? Either way, I've never seen a literary device used so legally before. I'm sorry, I don't think I've mentioned the part about forcing teachers to out gay kids yet. Spoiler alert, the spider dies in the end. The next few paragraphs of the House analysis are where it starts to get really shady. They start talking about how all people have the fundamental right of privacy. They state that this right of privacy even applies to children in school. And then they fully acknowledge that this bill will infringe upon the right of privacy. In the state of Florida, in order for your fundamental right of privacy to legally be breached, the reason for the breach must be of compelling state interest. Legally, an interest is compelling to the state when it is essential or necessary rather than a matter of choice, preference, or discretion. The burden of proving that intrusion is compelling state interest belongs to, and this is the fun part, the state. Basically, what that means is that if the state of Florida wants to intrude on the privacy of students, which it literally just admitted to wanting to do, then the state of Florida has to justify that that intrusion is essential or necessary. The easiest way to prove that is by pointing to a law that says keeping whatever information you have private is actually illegal, which makes sense in some cases, like withholding the location of a criminal. That's aiding and abetting. It's essential or necessary for the state to get that information from you. Or, like, in Spider-Man No Way Home, it technically wasn't illegal for Mysterio to reveal Spider-Man's true identity because the state believed that Spider-Man was a murderer. Does that make sense? Like, Peter Parker's right to privacy was breached, but it was legal because revealing his identity was of compelling state interest, i.e. catching a murderer. Thanks, Marvel. Luckily, for any worried students, the state of Florida doesn't have any laws that they could point to and say, keeping this type of information from parents is illegal. They didn't until last year, at least. The state of Florida passed the Parents' Bill of Rights in 2021, and you probably won't believe this, but that bill has pretty much exactly the wording necessary for Florida to prove compelling state interest. Honestly, it's kind of impressive to see Florida play a chess move like this, but only impressive in the same way that it's impressive to watch a child tie his shoe for the first time. Wow, good job. None of us really believed you were smart enough to do that all by yourself. And for anybody that wants to be offended on behalf of the state of Florida or their politicians because of that joke, 1, shut up. 2, I don't care. 3, there's a game where people type in their birthday on Google followed by Florida man and compare with their friends to see who has the weirdest one. Someone has thrown an alligator through a drive-thru window not once, but twice, and the only Super Bowl with a streaker in the history of American football took place in Tampa. So excuse me if my expectations for the state are lower than a shorty with apple-bottom jeans and boots with the fur during a chorus of Flo Rida's 2007 hit song Low, which, may I remind you, is low, 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 low. If you're wondering, that was absolutely my favorite joke in here. And while I am impressed at Florida for having the slightest bit of foresight, I am a little upset that they've chosen to enforce this bill the same way a tired parent enforces a no, because I said so. The House analysis also cites the court case Frazier v. Wynn to affirm that, quote, the fundamental rights to privacy for a kid do not invalidate or override the fundamental rights of parents related to child rearing. They're trying to prove that parents' rights over their kids are more important than kids' rights to privacy. However, after reading the court opinion on the case cited, I feel like it's wildly important to also mention how the court said, quote, in individual cases, the balance of rights between parents, the school, and the student could favor the student. Totally off topic, but good life advice. If you're gonna cite a source, you might want to read the source. This isn't like the presentation on Catch-22 I had to give an AP Lit my senior year of high school even though I never actually read the book. Because unlike the book, you don't get to spark notes court cases before having to cite them in a legal doc. And, more importantly, unlike high school, this is actually important. I spent a lot of time dissecting the House analysis, which is good because understanding the House analysis helps us to better understand the bill. However, I still haven't gotten around to the part that makes teachers have to out gay kids. Section 1, Substantive Information. Chapter A, Effective Changes. Subsection, Present Situation. Paragraph, Florida school districts maintain policies that exclude parents. Or, colloquially, the last paragraph on page 4 before the citations in the footnote. Quote, while the Parents' Bill of Rights provides that important information relating to a minor child should not be withheld from his or her parent while the minor child is in the custody of the school district, multiple school districts in Florida maintain policies that exclude parents from discussions and decisions on sensitive topics relating to students. They provide a link in the citations to specify which policies exclude parents and what sensitive topics they are referring to. The link directs us to pages 29 and 30 of the Broward County Public Schools LGBTQ+ Critical Support Guide, which say, quote, federal courts have repeatedly held the Constitution prohibits government officials from disclosing information about a person's sexual orientation except under limited circumstances. The expression of sexual orientation is an innately personal choice. Therefore, just as teachers and school administrators cannot discourage a student from being out at school, they also cannot encourage or even force a student to be out at home. It is up to the student and the student alone to decide where and when to be open about their LGBTQ+ identity. The next paragraph instructs teachers that according to federal guidelines, if a parent asks about their child's sexual orientation or gender identity, the teacher cannot tell the parent without the consent of the student. So there you have it. These are the things that the new bill aims to revoke. In sections 1 and 2 of the bill, they tell us that school personnel must inform parents about changes in their students' mental, emotional, or physical health or well-being, and that schools cannot make rules against not doing that. According to their own admission in the analysis, what they really mean to do is force teachers to out kids to their parents. That's it. No jokes, no analogies, just a bill that says you legally have to tell me if my son is gay. At this point in the video, if you still agree with this bill, I can only think of 4 possible reasons why. 1, you blindly liked the bill before this and never actually intended on changing your mind regardless of the facts, in which case, I don't respect you enough to care about your opinion. Please don't waste my time by commenting. 2, you're homophobic. Whether due to some random old man's interpretation of the Bible or because that's just how you grew up, either way, you need to work on that because as it stands now, I don't respect you enough to care about your opinion. Please don't waste my time commenting unless your comment is a genuine attempt to understand something you've never had a chance to understand. 3, you don't understand why forcing a teacher to out a student to their parents could be a bad thing. If this is you, I'm kind of jealous. It means you've probably never had to deal with discrimination and you have a pretty healthy relationship with your parents. Unfortunately, not all of us are so lucky. According to a study in 2019 by the Children's Rights Organization, 30% of kids in foster care and 40% of homeless kids identify as LGBTQ+. Compare that to the only 11% of kids not on the street or in the system. Why is the difference so drastic? Abuse, neglect, and abandonment. Furthermore, as pages 29 and 30 of the Broward County Public Schools LGBTQ+ Critical Support Guide said, federal courts have repeatedly held the Constitution prohibits government officials from disclosing information about a person's sexual orientation. This is seen in the case of Sterling versus Borough of Minorville. Back in 1997, a cop arrested 2 gay kids in a park at night. While in custody, the cop threatened to tell one of the kids' grandfathers about him being gay. That kid was so scared of that happening that he took his own life shortly after being released. The mom sued the cops, and during the hearing, it was determined that the cop had violated the kid's constitutional right to privacy and therefore would not be granted qualified immunity. The court said, quote, it is difficult to imagine a more private matter than one's sexuality and a less likely probability that the government would have a legitimate interest in disclosure of sexual identity. I know this got dark and sad, but not everything is always puppies and rainbows. I just hope this information helped you understand why this is a bad thing. 4, you're a parent who thinks that sexual orientation and gender identity are things your child should only discuss with you, and that as a parent, it is your right to know about it. I don't respect the people I described in 1 and 2. But my feelings for people like you go well beyond a lack of respect. You do not get to control every single thing your kid does, no matter how badly you want to. And also, this one might hurt you the most, but you need to hear it. Your kid doesn't owe you anything. I'm your parent. I have a right to know. Shut up, you whiny, self-censored narcissist. You're looking at an issue through a lens of how can I make everyone else fix this for me, instead of how can I fix this myself. If life gave you lemons, you would take the world to court for not also handing you sugar and water. The same people that complain about participation trophies are the ones that now feel entitled to know the most personal aspects of their children without actually earning it. Go piss up a flagpole, you hypocrite. You look at a problem backwards and it makes everything worse for everyone. If a cow needed help giving birth, you would probably stick your hand in its mouth. This type of thinking is right on par with thinking the best way to stop abortion is to make it illegal, or the best way to stop illegal immigration is to build a wall, or the best way to get kids to stop hating how America treats black people is to stop teaching it altogether. Do you understand what I'm saying? If you want to know if your kid is gay or trans, the best way to do that is to raise them in a safe, comfortable environment where they trust you enough to tell you. If you are this type of person, I hope what I'm telling you hurts, and I hope this is the catalyst for you to become a better person for the sake of your kids. Teachers, there is a glimmer of hope written into the text of this bill. Section 2 says that a school district can still adopt procedures that permit school personnel from withholding information from a parent if a reasonably prudent person believes that it would result in abuse, neglect, or abandonment. All you have to do is prove that you're a reasonably prudent person. Now, because you chose to be a teacher in the Florida public education system, I don't know if that disqualifies you from being considered reasonable or prudent, but I'm pretty sure it's at least one of the two. That was a joke. Please laugh. This got really heavy really quickly, and I didn't want it to end like that. A reasonably prudent person would laugh, you know. I was thinking about reading through all the proposed amendments that got vetoed. Like, the one that says the school district doesn't have to pay the court costs if the court deems they didn't actually violate this law. Or the one that wanted to change the instructions on sexual orientation or gender identity in kindergarten through 3rd grade to all sexual discourse, which people seem to think it says anyway. I was gonna do that. Then I thought, I'm tired. Playoff basketball is on right now. I'd rather watch the Celtics win a championship. I really hope that last part doesn't age poorly.